Ever wondered why you're watching this video? Deep down, you already know the answer. Something inside you knew that you needed to get to this exact moment. This doesn't show up for everyone. It only comes to those who, without realizing it, have been preparing inwardly for a long time. And yes, you were already ready. Because from this moment on, something starts to shift in your favor. Starting today, things begin to move. In the next few minutes, you're going to come across a sign that doesn't usually repeat itself. It appears once and then it disappears. That's why you should stay until the end. Because what you're about to hear came exactly when it needed to. And don't expect a spectacular sign. It won't be a thunderclap. You won't hear a mysterious voice whispering your destiny. That only happens in the movies. The real sign is much more subtle. It's that feeling that just awakened in the center of your chest, as if an invisible mechanism had been switched on again. Maybe it had been weeks, or even months, feeling like everything was frozen. You were going in circles that you kept trying over and over again, and nothing ever moved forward. That changes today. Imagine that inside you there is a silent gear, one that drives everything that matters, the opportunities that appear, the people who arrive, the doors that suddenly open without explanation. That gear was never broken, it was just at a standstill, waiting for the exact moment to start turning again. And that is precisely the sign you're receiving now. The moment when everything fits together again, and things start moving again. Maybe you notice it as a strange relief, as if a weight you've been carrying for a long time is finally starting to disappear, even if you didn't even know what to call it. It's not your imagination. It's your inner self reacting to something it already knows. And there are more clues. However, I want to suggest an experiment. And I don't want you to just listen to it. I want you to do it. Look at any object you have nearby. It could be your hand, a cup, the wall, whatever. Now watch it for 10 seconds, like it's the first time you've seen it, without thinking. Just observing. Do you notice what just happened? During those seconds, your mind stopped racing. The noise stopped, and something appeared that usually goes unnoticed. Presence. That's exactly what Daniel, whom you'll meet later, discovered before his life began to change. He didn't find a magical answer. He found a moment of presence. And from there, he started making completely different decisions. Maybe the sign you had been waiting for so long wasn't an extraordinary event. Maybe it was this small moment when finally you stopped living so distracted. If you feel like you just regained that moment of connection with yourself, write this phrase in the comments. Today I heard the sign. Because there are decisions that change an entire life. They usually begin with a small, challenging gesture that no one else notices, except you. Think for a moment. In the last few days, have you felt like something was about to change, even if you didn't know what? That quiet restlessness. That feeling like the air changing right before dawn. Have you ever felt the urge to put your life in order? To leave behind people, habits, or situations that no longer fit? To start over without a completely logical reason? Is that part of the sign? The body always understands first. The mind comes later, trying to catch up. That's why you ended up here. You weren't just here for information. You came because a part of you recognized this moment before you were even aware of it. And that part is almost never wrong. Now, I want you to make an important distinction. A sign is not the same as a desire. Desire makes you feel like something is missing. It pushes you toward a future where you believe you'll finally be complete. The sign does exactly the opposite. It makes you feel like something has finally found where it belongs. Desire creates pressure. The sign sets you free. If what you're feeling right now is that unexpected calm, that little break in the middle of everyday noise, then pay attention. You're not making anything up. You're simply recognizing something that was already there. I want to propose something before we continue. Write a single word in the comments. Begin. Only that word. You don't do it for me. It's a way of telling yourself that you accept this new shift, that you stop resisting and allow that gear to turn again. Because that which is named begins to take shape, and once it happens, it never goes back to the starting point. There's something you need to understand about this kind of sign. They don't work like an alarm you can put off until tomorrow. Authentic signs only appear when two things coincide: your inner state and the precise moment, and that combination never repeats itself in exactly the same way. That's why this moment is different. Not because someone wants to scare you, but because that's how real change works. When a gear turns again, it doesn't undo the movement. It keeps moving forward. And that should give you peace of mind, because it means that the version of you that felt trapped is already being left behind. Everything that seemed motionless, everything that wasn't moving forward, everything you felt was stuck, belongs to a stage that is ending. However, many people receive the sign, and yet they let it slip away. They feel it. They recognize it, but they doubt. They tell themselves there will be another chance tomorrow, that they can wait a little longer. That's where everything stops again. Because tomorrow you won't be exactly the same person you are today. The person ready to receive this sign exists in this very moment, not tomorrow. Now. And maybe you're wondering why it happened today. The answer is simple. Signs don't follow a calendar. They follow a frequency. There is an exact point where your inner state becomes compatible with what you've been waiting for so long. Not before, not after. Exactly when it was supposed to happen. For a long time, that moment still hadn't come. That's why everything seemed stuck. But today it has. And you know it because even though on the outside it still seems like nothing has changed, within you, a different kind of certainty has emerged. Silent, firm. Like a voice that doesn't need to convince you of anything. It just says, now this is it. That's the sound of the gear clicking back into place. It doesn't come from the outside. It was always inside you. And when you finally hear it, there's a phrase that comes up with absolute clarity. It already started. Maybe that voice appeared just a few seconds ago and you didn't know how to identify it. Now you do. Now you understand what it was. It was the sign making itself known. And when an authentic sign finds its place, there's no turning back. Think about it for a moment. From today, there are two versions of you. One received the signal and allowed the mechanism to start turning again. The other ignored it and kept waiting. From this moment on, both follow completely different paths. The one who decided to let it go remains trapped in the same cycle, waiting for that famous someday that, curiously, never comes. The other one, yours, has already started to move forward. And with each passing day, the distance between those two lives will only grow greater. The best part is that you don't need to do anything extraordinary to stay on this path. You don't need a heroic act. Just don't stop the movement that has just begun. And if you're still here listening to these words, that's already proof that something inside you decided to keep going. Now pay very close attention, because what comes next is probably the most important part of this whole message. So far, we've talked about a change that is starting to happen. From this moment on, we're really going to set things in motion. But first, I want to tell you something you may have needed to hear for a long time. If for years you felt like you were doing everything right and still nothing changed, it wasn't because you lacked faith. It wasn't because you weren't trying hard enough, and certainly not because you didn't deserve it. That was never the problem. It simply wasn't the right time yet. That gear still hadn't found the exact spot where it could fit back in. And no matter how much you pushed, there was no way to make that moment come any sooner. That's why that wait wasn't a punishment. It was training. Every experience you lived through, even the ones that hurt the most, was gradually tuning your frequency until it brought you right here to this moment. That's why the sign appears today, not 2 years ago. Not next month. Today. Because today, finally, everything comes together. And now I want you to go from understanding it to feeling it. You don't need any object. There's no need for a complicated ritual. Just you, in this moment, place one hand over the center of your chest. No rush. Feel the warmth of your own hand. Right there is where that mechanism we've been talking about resides. Take a deep breath, very slowly. And when you exhale, imagine that gear, which had been still for so long, slowly starts to turn. Don't try to force it. Don't push. Just allow it to happen, like a wheel that, after being still for so long, starts moving naturally again. A turn, then another. More fluid each time. Smoother. More natural. As if I had always known how to do it. And as that movement continues, everything that seemed blocked also starts to reorganize. The opportunities that seemed closed. The people who hadn't arrived yet. The doors that remained shut. Everything starts to synchronize with that new rhythm. Now imagine something even bigger. That gear turning inside your chest doesn't work in isolation. It's connected to everything. As if the thinnest threads of light connected it to people you haven't met yet, to opportunities that don't have your name on them yet, with resources that already exist but are still on their way to you. Every turn that mechanism makes moves something much bigger. As you change, the world also starts to rearrange itself. You don't need to control that process. Just keep turning, because while you do your part, reality starts to do its part. And that's exactly what's happening while you listen to these words. Stay there for a few more seconds, because now we're going to go even deeper. If you can, close your eyes for a moment and stop imagining. Start to feel. Notice how that movement stops being an idea and starts to become a physical sensation. A gentle warmth that arises in the center of the chest, that slowly expands toward the shoulders. It descends down the arms. Gradually, it moves through your entire body. That warmth doesn't come to give you something new. It comes to unlock what has always been inside you, waiting for the right moment to flow again. And here I want you to pay very close attention, because this is the point where most people give up on the process without realizing it. Everyone says they want to change their life, but very few understand how that change really begins. Because the mind always expects fireworks. It expects a stroke of luck, an extraordinary piece of news, a call that solves everything, a miracle so obvious that it leaves no room for doubt. However, the transformations that last don't start with fanfare. They start in silence. And that's precisely why almost no one recognizes them when they arrive. Let me tell you the story of Daniel. Daniel was 38 years old. If someone had seen him from the outside, they would have thought he was living a completely normal life. He had a job. He paid his bills. He went out with some friends from time to time. He never lacked food or a place to sleep. But inside, he had been feeling exactly the same way for years. The feeling of being stuck, like he was reliving the same Monday repeatedly. He woke up to the alarm. He looked at his phone even before getting up. He read news that drained his energy. He went to work on autopilot. He came home tired. He had dinner while watching whatever was on TV or online. Before sleeping, he repeated the same promise to himself. Tomorrow I'll start changing my life. But the next day would come, and it would be exactly the same again. Not because I was lazy, quite the opposite. I had read dozens of self-help books. I had listened to hundreds of hours of lectures. I was familiar with the teachings of Neville Goddard, Joe Dispenza, Jacobo Grinberg, and Carl Jung. I knew exactly what I had to do. The problem was something else. He couldn't manage to feel different. And when a person can't manage to feel different, he ends up acting exactly the same. As the months went by, a dangerous idea began to take hold. It didn't appear all of a sudden. It grew little by little. At first, it was just an occasional thought. Then it became a belief. And finally, it became part of his identity. The phrase was simple. Maybe this doesn't work for me. And when someone starts to believe that, they start making hundreds of invisible decisions that confirm that idea. For example, a company posted a better job opening. Daniel saw it. But even before reading the requirements, he thought, I'm sure they're looking for someone with more experience. He didn't even send the resume. A friend suggested he attend an event where business people and entrepreneurs were going to meet. He would reply some other day, I don't know anyone. I don't feel like it. A girl smiled at him in a cafe. He looked the other way because he had already decided without any evidence that she probably wouldn't be interested. Do you realize? None of that seemed like an important decision. They were details, small choices, but added up over months. They built exactly the same life. And here's the fascinating part. Daniel was convinced that it was life that didn't change, when in reality it was him who played the same character every day, until something apparently insignificant happened. One Friday afternoon, he received a message from a former university classmate. He invited him to a gathering after almost 15 years without seeing each other. His first reaction was automatic. No. He thought he would be tired, that he wouldn't know anyone, that it would probably be awkward. There would be another occasion. The same excuses as always. But just when he was about to reply that he wouldn't go, he asked himself a question he had never asked before. What if the real problem isn't that my life stays the same, but the same version of me is always the one answering? That question changed something. It didn't eliminate the fear. It didn't suddenly make him feel confident. It just created a small crack in the pattern. That night, he did something new. He went. Nothing spectacular happened. No one welcomed him with applause. No investor showed up offering him millions. He didn't find a suitcase full of money waiting for him at the door. It was a completely normal night. He talked to several people. He laughed. He remembered anecdotes from college. And when he was about to leave, someone came up to ask him what he did for a living. They talked for just 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Nothing more. Weeks later, that same person wrote to him. At their company, they were looking for someone with exactly Daniel's kind of experience. He agreed to do an interview. He got it. He joined that company. There, he met the person who would become his business partner years later. Together, they founded a small business. That business ended up generating much more money than he had ever imagined in his entire life. Now, I want to ask you a question. When did Daniel's life really change? Most people would answer, when he got the new job. But no, others would say, when he met his future partner. Not that either. Daniel's life changed much earlier. It changed 5 seconds before he pressed the button to reply to that message. It changed the moment he decided to stop responding like the person who had spent 3 years always saying no. That was the real miracle. Because from that moment on, the whole chain of events started to come together on its own. And that happens all the time. People believe opportunity comes first, and then the person changes. But most of the time, it happens exactly the other way around. First, the person changes, and then opportunities start to appear that were always right in front of her. Think about this. If Daniel had turned down that invitation, the company would have continued to exist. His future partner would have kept attending that meeting. The opportunity would have been there just the same. The only thing that wouldn't be there was the version of Daniel capable of meeting her. You start to understand the difference. You don't always need more opportunities to appear. Many times you need to become the person capable of recognizing the ones that already exist. And that starts in surprisingly small ways. You start replying to messages you used to ignore. You dare to make that call you've been putting off for months. You accept an invitation you would normally turn down. You raise your hand in a meeting when you would have stayed silent before. You start a conversation with someone you don't know. You sign up for that course you've been putting off for a year. You go out for a walk instead of spending another night feeding the same thoughts. From the outside, they seem like minor actions. But from the inside, you're breaking a pattern that has been ruling your life for years. And when a pattern is broken, all of reality starts to reorganize itself because life responds to who you are over and over again, not to who you say you want to be. That's why there are people who have spent years visualizing abundance while making decisions out of fear. They talk about confidence. But every choice is born from insecurity. They talk about opportunities, but they refuse anything that takes them out of their comfort zone. They talk about change, but they live exactly the same as they did 5 years ago. And reality simply gives them back an expanded version of that same pattern. That's why I want to suggest an exercise that might seem too simple, but that's exactly where its strength lies. For the next 7 days, don't try to change your whole life. That will only drain your energy. Do something much smarter. Every morning, ask yourself, what would the version of me who already trusts that his life is changing do today? Just one action, not 10. 1. Maybe answer that call. Maybe send that email. Maybe start that project for 20 minutes. Maybe apologize. Maybe say no. Maybe say yes. At the end of the day, ask yourself again, what decision did I make today that my old self probably wouldn't have made? Do this for a week, just 1 week. You'll begin to discover something extraordinary. That real change never begins when the world transforms. It starts when you stop reacting like the person who was trapped in the same cycle. Because in that moment, without realizing it, you start to become someone who attracts completely different experiences. And when that happens, people on the outside will say you were lucky. They'll say the right opportunity showed up, that everything suddenly lined up. But you'll know the truth. It wasn't a stroke of luck. It was the result of hundreds of small decisions that began the day you stopped acting like the person who was waiting for life to change. And you started behaving like the person who was already ready to receive that change.